Hi, morning. I'm Steve Bradley. I'm the nominated EU national contact point for SMEs in the UK. I work at a company called Beta Technology here in Doncaster, but to the Technology Strategy Board. My intention is to try and introduce in a degree of detail the SME instrument as part of Horizon 2020. But to do that, I just briefly want to go over the kind of big picture, the context, and then to go into more detailed slides and so on. There will be on the slides that I'm using much more detailed information there for reference, which will be available on request, but we'll work his way through that. This kind of thing works best if I can actually target specific questions. So if anybody has any questions they want to log as we go, I'll either deal with them if I can as we go, or I will certainly address them at a future point, either by emails or by telephone. This first slide is really a graphic just trying to show how it's strategically positioned to target support to SMEs through the various growth and development stages. And from bottom to top, it builds upon regional stroke national support to try and encourage and foster growth through transnational collaborative development. A lot of words. Transnational means more than one country. Collaborative, fairly self-explanatory. As opposed to international, which is actually concerning or involving two or more countries. By design, it's not because people think it's a good idea. It is actually by design. It's part of achieving the Europe 2020 strategy, which is about delivering growth that's smart through more effective investments in education, research, innovation, sustainable through a decisive move, hopefully, towards a low carbon economy, and inclusive with a strong emphasis on job creation and poverty reduction by trying to fund research and other activities to try and promote the transition from innovative ideas into actual products and services that can create growth and jobs through their successful exploitation. It's an integrated approach. Horizon 2020 is the key financial instrument of the Innovation Union, which is one of these flagship initiatives, and it aims to complement the other 6 initiatives by trying to increase the EU's global competitiveness by improving conditions for research and innovation, including access to finance. It's not just about grants. So it tries to address the identified societal challenges and technological issues that require this transnational approach because they're simply beyond the scale and scope of individual countries, trying to reduce the duplication in funding, add value by ensuring that there's an EU-wide cooperation, and again, adopting an integrated approach, as I've said, not just about grants to SMEs, but about putting a support structure in place to promote progress, which starts from feasibility all the way through to successfully commercially exploitable outcomes. And key to all of this is that it recognises SMEs as the critical drivers of growth, and in particular, the target group of those looking at their continued growth through internationalisation and innovation-driven development plans. Well, why? Why the need for a change? Well, Horizon 2020 in itself is a response to a range of studies around FP7 and the impact of EU investment in research-led development. It's partly intended to address the lack of development that wasn't happening from research-led projects, in particular through the Research for SMEs part of FP7, where there was an awful lot of good research, but not necessarily leading to a leading-edge outcome. Statistically, less than half of the industrial partners actually use the research projects as part of their own long-term development plans. So the tendency was found to be more focused on short-term problem solving. Perfectly understandable, but it wasn't in fact leading to the level of growth that was being sought by the EU resources being invested. Only around a fifth of those SMEs participating were identified as this target, as it were, of strategic innovators. And that's why that's been the targeted, because they can provide this impetus and growth that's actually being sought. Again, academic-led research was mainly around extending knowledge, which can lead to positive outcomes, but not necessarily, again, commercially exploitable ones. And that's meant that because results not exploited, because despite being well managed and administered, they were not necessarily envisaged beyond publication and dissemination into the public domain. So there's a recognised strong relationship between internationalisation and innovation. And again, this support was not accessed by this target group of SMEs because they weren't aware of it. They have low awareness. So the opportunities to accelerate their growth are actually lost. And linked to that, but not surprisingly, is this perceived bureaucracy and time to grant for decisions, in that it simply is just not quick enough to attract businesses with their own dynamic plans for growth. So, within Horizon 2020, there are various kinds of things that SMEs can be involved with. But in context, again, to underline that SMEs are critical to the success of the EU 2020 strategy. So to try and promote progress in achieving this smart, sustainable, inclusive growth, it's actually trying to use them as an engine to address not only this current economic issues created by financial crisis of 2007-2008, but to try and create the conditions for a more competitive economy and higher employment across Europe. Statistically, as it's often said and quoted, 99% of all European businesses are SMEs. 85% of net new jobs in the EU between 2002 and 2010 were created by small and medium-sized enterprises. And that's, again, not a surprise because SMEs are, by reputation, more agile and therefore more able to adapt quickly to and exploit new market opportunities and take their innovative ideas to market. An example I can remember working with a company in the north of England. They had an order book, a clothing company, of 2 weeks and no more than 2 weeks. But for the last 20 years, that's how they've operated in business. It was just a way of business life. So Horizon 2020 is also about trying to facilitate the smoother transition from strategic and applied research to its deployment and its application by these SMEs across all different sectors to achieve the commercialization. It's not just manufacturing, but it can be processing, service sectors as well. Within the main part of Horizon 2020, there's the minimum eligibility for collaborative R&D projects across all the different three priorities is 3 legal entities from 3 states, not just SMEs, but there is a different arrangement that applies to the SME instrument, which we're going to look at in a bit more depth. So the SME instrument is part of the SME support that's funded through, in budget terms, a 20% target of budget directed to SMEs through leading technologies and the challenges. And 7% of that is committed to allowing a bottom-up or business-led approach in response to the challenges identified in the various calls. So the EU investment through grant aid is only part of the support that's actually available. The EU funding is also used to try and develop a wider support infrastructure for SMEs, including coaching and mentoring and routes to finance. So within Horizon 20, there's still continued support for research-led companies through Eurostars and the support that was previously made available through the Competitiveness and Innovation Programme. And with access to risk finance to try and help the finance market itself have more confidence in the projects and those SMEs who are supported through Horizon 2020, providing, if you will, a kind of quality assurance label. And that's more about evolution rather than revolution of the support that used to be made available. Things like Marie Curie, a scheme that provides opportunities for researchers to learn from new environments, including staff exchanges between academic and non-academic organisations. So the SME instrument itself, we've said it's intended to address the financing needs of all types of highly innovative, for-profit SMEs, with a strong ambition to develop, grow, internationalise, regardless of whether they're high-tech, research-driven, or non-research conducting, manufacturing, social, service companies. It's targeted to provide the financial support to meet the identified funding gap that currently exists between funding for research, so for instance through universities, and the finance market for commercialisation, so business angels, venture capitalists, etc. It's intended to be a vehicle that will allow those SMEs participating to try and enter into the new markets, promoting their growth and creating a much higher return on their investment, but that's for both the business involved and the EU. I mentioned that only for-profit SMEs will be able to apply for funding. The SME exclusive instrument will try to encourage those for-profit companies to put forward their most innovative ideas so that SMEs are able to choose their own cooperation partners, to organise their project, their innovation project, in a flexible way that best suits their own growth plans. It's their growth plans that are deriving this, and it's a way of the EU recognising that. So that can include subcontracting and to research organisations and others if required by the project. But single company support is possible if the project has a clearly described, credible and demonstrable European dimension. There is no definition for that, not that I've found yet anyway, but basically in questions to the Commission they mean anything that's beyond regional or national, and something that can lead to what they hope will be radical changes and greater effectiveness in how business, be it product development, processes, services, marketing, etc., is actually done. So single SME can use this as an instrument, but it, more often than not, I suspect, will be actually a consortia-led approach. It's designed to be competitive and business-oriented, to try and give it a credibility within this particular target market of strategically innovative SMEs. So the evaluation and the selection process at each stage will look to promote only those projects who are able to demonstrate a good chance of becoming commercially successful. And it's much more reflecting a similar approach to the due diligence requirements of private investors such as business angels, venture capital funds, etc., rather than the proposals weighted towards science and the technology involved. And this is a move away from the emphasis on science and technology to commercial potential, a fundamental shift in the Commission's approach compared to FP7. I've mentioned that it's competitive. Well, the Olympics have been used as an analogy on several occasions when I've spoken to the Commission, and to illustrate the approach, it's about how many would like to compete, but actually there is only a few that can take part, and then only after they've done an awful lot of preparation, and then not all can win. So the SME instrument is trying to ensure that only the best compete, and that the winning SME-led projects are those that have got the best chance of impacting on the EU's strategic objectives by successfully capitalising on their own plans for growth and creating a mutual benefit for everyone concerned. I've used the phrase bottom up a few times, no analogies around that one, but business led, so it's about the EU trying to seek and capture the response from innovative SMEs within their own growth-led plans to the various challenges and technologies that have been identified and need to be addressed. And the language that they use is to try and call these topic areas. And these have been identified in the SME call to provide support for small cross-sector and interdisciplinary projects. The grant funding, this EU investment, is actually going to be geared to the business innovation plans created by SMEs. So rather than, as in FP7, fixed stage reporting and reconciliation to actual costs, which led to actually some fairly understandable errors, just because of the complexity, and contributed to delays in FP7, it's intended to be more output-based, geared to the prior definition and agreement of outputs, deliverables and milestones. Again, that's Commission terminology, but it is about the key stages so you know when you're getting to where you want to be, as defined by the business development plans as well as related project costs. This is a visual reference, if you will, to try and illustrate how support is intended to promote progress from the idea of concept of how the innovation-led proposition can lead to a commercial success. So it's beyond the research results, all the way through to its successful exploitation. It's intended, and I think intention is certainly there, that the SME instrument will be governed by SME-friendly rules and procedures, and that's to try and encourage greater participation and address the concerns around bureaucracy by providing a faster time to contract, allowing a more flexible and efficient project management by simplifying the rules, such as one project, one funding rate, with a much broader acceptance of SME's own accounting practices. So it's 100% for research, it's 70% for innovation. However, I would note, in italics if you will, that simplification for the Commission might not necessarily mean the same for the SMEs. There's a three-phased evaluation process involved with, as we've said, selection and award criteria that will require excellence in innovation and commercial potential, a very strong focus on economic impact, and the company's demonstrable potential to achieve those expected results. Ambition will certainly just not be enough, and there has to be European added value. I'll go into this in a bit more depth in a moment, but SMEs can enter direct at phase 2, but they would have to provide the same level of information in their application as someone who's completed phase 1. And in phase 3, it's not about grant element. There is no grant element, but it's intended that through involvement in phases 1 and 2, this becomes a quality assurance label to help those SMEs raise the required private equity, along with additional incentives for the finance markets themselves to encourage the leverage of private funding, co-investors or follow-up investments to try and help promote the successful commercialization and exploitation of these project research-led results and innovative ideas. So through participation from a successful application at phase 1, there's also additional coaching and mentoring support that will be made available alongside the grant aid to promote the progress and growth of those successful applicants. Excuse me a moment. So, for both phases 1 and 2, calls will be bottom-up, business-led, and continuously open, with around 4 cut-off dates for evaluation per year, to try and give businesses the opportunity to access the support at a time that's best suited to their own business development plans, and then evaluated against 3 criteria with this high quality threshold. So there will not be, as in previous, no ranking lists, no negotiation stage, which will speed up the time to the grant decision. Over the 7 years of the programme, it's anticipated, it's a mathematical calculation, there is nothing that says this will happen, that the budget will actually provide for around 5,200 phase 1 projects, so this is the lump sum of €50,000, and about 1,700 phase 2 projects, with a calculated average project contribution of around €1.5 million. As I've alluded to, as mainly innovation activities will be supported to promote this business growth and exploitation beyond the results from the research stage, and to further simplify the process, single funding rate, 70% of eligible direct cost will be applied. So companies who have got a business interest are expected to, yes, invest their own resources, but alongside this EU investment. In phase 1, so left-hand side, we're looking at the phase 1 concept and feasibility assessment. The objective is to try and ensure that SMEs receive funding support to explore and assess the scientific or technical feasibility and commercial potential of an innovative new idea or concept that's already been developed, in order to try and identify an appropriate potential route for exploitation. So as part of keeping the process simple, see that word occurs quite a lot. In phase 1, a lump sum contribution of €50,000 is made towards direct eligible costs of an assumed figure of €71,429, and in the template for the application this is shown in a table 3.4, and it's reflected, or you will have to reflect, in the work package description identifying what the actual project costs are. It's intended to be payable through an upfront payment to get the thing started, and the balance then on delivery of the agreed outcomes, which will include this Business Innovation Plan version 2. The outcome of phase 1 will actually then be a meaningful feasibility report, including a Business Innovation Plan version 2, which will reflect project achievements and the intended route to exploitation. It doesn't necessarily follow that this would then move on to phase 2. It could actually show that solutions are already existing on the market, so another funding request wouldn't be required. Or by buying existing know-how or IPR, the problem that's trying to be addressed could be solved. So again, no further funding. But it could also be that the private finance for the development of the project is sought, linking to the financial facilities supported under the specific objective of access to finance. Quite often, though, it's certainly anticipated, it could show that additional demonstration or market readiness activities are required, which could lead to an application for funding in phase 2. Projects within phase 1 should be on average, it's assumed, 6 months, but it can be longer if requested and justified by the SME. There is a target of 8 to 12 weeks to contract from evaluation cut-off point, and I'll come to those dates later on. There is a slide which will indicate those. But application, the initial application in the form of a business innovation plan, this version 1, is short. There's around 10 pages, and the online template which is now available will elaborate on this, with additional space to show who's actually going to be involved. As I've mentioned, reporting's only at the end of the project, there's nothing in between, the main outcome being captured in this business innovation plan. Significantly, to try and avoid multiple applications, to allow the SMEs to focus their resources on the key planned developments, there is only one successful application per company at a time that will be allowed, and you won't be able to apply for a phase 1 during the submission and/or implementation of a successful phase 2 project. Phase 2 itself, the object is to allow those businesses who have a successfully evaluated feasibility report, or this business innovation plan version 2, around about 30 pages, complemented by an outline of the proposed future work, which can be either developed under phase 1 or outside Horizon 2020 to access this EU investment support to further develop their innovation project. What that means is that any new direct entrant would have to fulfill the same requirements as all those businesses who have been supported through phase 1. But it's worth noting, it's anticipated that the phase 1 funding, complemented by this mentoring and coaching that's made available to those beneficiaries, should have also helped to facilitate the preparation of a solid innovation project. There are some stories, success stories, if you will, case studies, on the Commission's TechWeb portal of various successful FP7 Research for SMEs demonstration projects, which is directly relevant to this part of the SME instrument. So the demonstration through the FP7 scheme is directly relative to phase 2. And some of these actually illustrate how various projects identified different cross-cutting themes and sectors as routes to commercialisation of the kind that's going to be sought through this SME instrument. One of which I've had some dealings with, along with my colleague over in Ireland, was a project called Waterbeam, which was about smart irrigation technology to reduce costs, save water, and so on. By doing so, it was actually addressing, as an example, some of the societal challenges today about waste reduction, saving water, and saving money through this particular project to increase crop quality and yield. So it's food security as well. It involved a series of sensors planted across a field to measure soil water presence and the different environmental parameters and indicators for crop development. And through a wireless network, an intelligent software application, it involved an innovative use of existing known technology because it provided accurate and complete real-time information on crop and field conditions, which led to these better crop yields. So that's one example, and there are others, and they're available from the TechWeb, but I've also got the brochure, which is freely available, and I can email that to anybody who's interested. Linked to that, under FP7, in this Research for SMEs scheme, we developed a model proposal, a fictitious, made-up proposal which represented or addressed the various kinds of questions that are still being posed for phase 2. The project that we came up with was one called Demo Pack, which was around demonstration of edible food packaging. So really imaginative use there of demonstration and so on. It was around an edible, a fictitious, but an edible polymer that could be used as a packaging material in response to the requirement, which we identified as an example, by the food industry for low-cost packaging that would satisfy kind of essential marketing and protection requirements, yet have negligible disposal problems. As part of illustrating, it's still a valid, I think, use of this as a project. It, for instance, identified that we looked at, with this made-up project, piloting. And what did that mean? What does that mean in terms of phase 2? Well, we looked at a relatively limited range of food products in this demonstration project of fish and apples. And it could be that that's the kind of piloting type activity that they're talking about. But because we'd identified from the research stage that there was still a gap to produce more material in order to further develop the process and demonstrate that the process and the concept could be scaled up and extended to a variety of products, that was the basis, or part of the basis, for the activity in this assumed project that was very similar to the phase 2 activity. So we could look at, for instance, work packages involving the testing of product-like prototypes, validation of research results, performance verification, looking at the evaluation of those results, and trying to produce semi-industrial scale prototype equipment. Market studies and commercialization, business market strategy, they're all eligible activity within this part of the program, the phase 2. Could be then, by the end of phase 2, it's intended that participating companies should be absolutely in a position to deploy and launch onto the market their new idea or product, process, service, whatever. But the business innovation plan version 3 that will be developed by the end of the project will have to contain a detailed marketing and commercialization strategy, I should say, and a financing plan describing how private investment will be used. In terms of funding, the EU investment in the form of a grant could be, phase 2, around 1 to 3 million, but that can be flexed if a strong enough business case can be made. I would mention projects can include some subcontracting. It is possible, but the focus very clearly is on supporting SME-led innovation activities with, as I've mentioned, results testing, prototyping, and so on. And it's about helping that SME to be more equipped with greater capacity and capability to manage its own growth through further innovation-led projects or development in the future. So if there is extensive subcontracting, it could actually jeopardize the SME's future growth and weaken the competitiveness of an application. In terms of duration, it should on average, as it indicates, be on average 12 months, but it can be longer, again, if required and justified by the SME who can put together a sufficiently strong business case. In terms of time to contract, as part of the simplification regarding evaluation and so on, there's a target of around 150 days, which in my calculations is around 5 months from the evaluation cut-off date to actually to get to a decision. And they're intending to use a standard grant agreement using an output-based funding model so that payments can be made after reaching each significant milestones to try and avoid the more complex arrangements around, for instance, accommodating any subcontracting. So any outsourcing of activity, that's not going to be required in the grant agreement. That's down to the SMEs to manage that themselves. Phase 3, the intended objective there is to try and promote the implementation and successful commercialization of these solutions that have been identified through these demonstration projects. So it'll facilitate access to private capital and what the commissionees have called first customers. It's basically those customers who are, or clients, if you will, who are prepared to be involved in early market trials, as well as offering their own kind of support service to the project. So the intention is successful completion of phases 1 and 2 represents this quality assurance label. It's intended to promote market take-up, private investment, and allow companies to get their project onto the market, which not only strengthens their competitiveness and boosts their growth, but helps the EU too. All applications are going to be through an online process through the revised version of the participant portal. Let me say there's an awful lot of work that's gone into developing the participant portal, and it is a leviathan that is still, I think, sometimes quite difficult to find your way around, but nevertheless, it will be the source of information for all the calls, including those involving specifically the facility to use this SME instrument. But it's through the different technologies and challenges and the identified topics that have been identified in the Innovation for SMEs work programme. The portal is actually searchable. One page I've found is really useful, and it's searchable by SME topics and the SME instrument, which will then lead you into more information about these calls. Now, I've summarised all that in a separate document, and I'm happy to make that available at point. Just let me know, and I'll certainly direct you toward that. I've mentioned it's an electronic application process. It's got an electronic signature of the grant agreements and any amendments of financial statements, again to simplify, if possible, the whole process and avoid errors. SME status and validation will be through a self-certified declaration that the information provided by yourselves is actually in line with the definition when it's available, with checks carried out by the organisation that's going to administer this, the Executive Agency for SMEs, but it's still in a stage of development. There will, in fact, so I'm told, be a facility to discuss the project through the portal rather than necessarily by separate emails, which may not be necessarily directly to the project officer, but the information will be transferred to the appropriate person in due course. Mentioned evaluation. There are no comprehensive EU-wide statistics or studies on this target group of high potential SMEs with a European perspective, but there's an estimation that between 1 to 6% of all 20.7 million SMEs belong to this target group of strategic innovators. So in a sense, the SME instrument is a little bit like a kind of a matchmaking analogy with some of these, I'm sure, very, very good websites, where you've got a mature multi-agency commission with significant budget seeking SMEs with mutual interest in innovation and growth through international collaboration. SMEs must have own project with outstanding commercial prospects and shared ambition for growth and success to match. So those target SMEs in the middle there are those in this central crossover area who can demonstrate that their project meets the very high standards required in all three areas of excellence in innovation, impact, and the efficient implementation criteria. So what does that require? Well, in terms of excellence in innovation, there must be something that's better than existing solutions and current state of the art. So it clearly addresses an identified challenge. In terms of commercialization, potential economic impact, there has to be an identified market that's been addressed and commercial potential. And implementation is around demonstrable potential and capability by the company or companies to achieve those expected results. Ambition will not be enough. Project results leading to a product or a service that's easy to use or produce for the customer and the SME's own business, a sales and marketing team in place to support production, coherent work plans and appropriate allocation of resources, etc. will all be part of that evaluation. And of course, the European added value, which as we've said is beyond regional or national levels. I mentioned before, organisationally, formally, the European Agency for Competitiveness and Innovation, the executive agency responsible for administering this scheme is the EASME, this Executive Agency for SMEs, and they're going to coordinate the evaluation process and seek to meet this reduced time to grant targets by avoiding processes that have led to avoidable delays or unavoidable delays in the past, rather. So they're going to introduce remote evaluation. I don't mean that's like by a robot. It's actually done where they don't necessarily have to come together and have consensus meetings over in Brussels. So it'll be competent evaluators who have business and technical experience that could cover both the science and the technology and innovation aspects, as well as the business case that's actually being made. It must be noted that evaluation will be strictly on the information provided. As part of this simplification, there won't be any recommendations for any substantial changes or improvements that could be made, as in the past, that have then been able to be picked up in a negotiation stage and reflected in evaluation summary reports. So there will not be that level of feedback. The page limits in the templates that will be available, currently there are draft versions available for both phase 1 and 2, but as the call is due to open next Saturday, St David's Day I think, then there will hopefully be the formal ones there then. But as part of this online process, we've said it's going to be simpler, there'll be worn and watermark indicators on the pages. So if you go beyond that limit, then it'll tell you you've gone beyond that limit and it won't necessarily be looked at by the evaluator. It's recognised the budget needed for the feasibility assessment might vary according to the type of innovation project. We mentioned for that first phase it's fixed fee, as it were, fixed sum, but that's something that evaluators will check to make sure that the requested finance corresponds to the proposed project in the actual work package description. only projects that have been positively assessed by all three evaluators as no consensus meetings and are above the general quality threshold will be funded until that particular budget for that period is actually allocated. So said, no negotiation stage, only high scoring quality projects will be funded. And with each criterion being out of 5, there's a scoring maximum of 15 available. The normal minimum threshold score is 3 for each, and an overall threshold 10 for collaborative projects. For the SME instrument, it'll actually be 13 for phase 1, 12 for phase 2, and when scoring is actually level, impact is considered first, with criterion given a weighting factor, and then there's a clear series of steps to establish priority. I've mentioned that there is in fact alongside the EU investment through the 70% grant funding that there is this coaching support, coaching and mentoring support, which is coordinated through the Enterprise Europe network. And the objective is to try and again enhance the commercial potential and impact of SMEs who are taking part in the programme to achieve what they've described as tangible organisational change. So it leaves behind a tangible legacy of this EU investment so that it becomes a stepping stone to sustainable future high growth. That's the intention. And it's going to be delivered by what have been described as high caliber individuals who have substantial experience in working in or with high growth businesses at a very senior level. But these coaches are independent of the EENs, but they're nevertheless being coordinated through them. So access will be through the appropriate regional EEN who will support the coach by linking the SME who's been successful to the other regional or national support services. And it's anticipated that this voluntary access coaching offered in phases 1 and 2 is around 1 to 5 days for phase 1 and 2 to 10 coaching days for phase 2. And remembering that this is coaching is paid in addition to phase 1 and phase 2 contribution. Access to finance. The main purpose of the access to finance scheme is this to help companies and other types of organisations who are engaged in this research innovation to gain easier access to loans, guarantees, counter guarantees, and all kinds of hybrid mezzanine and equity finance. And it builds, as I said before, it's evolution, not revolution. It builds upon what's gone before, so things like the risk sharing instrument that was there in FP7. What will be funded? Well, loans are administered by the European Investment Bank and by other banks who have been approved. These funds are likely to be available sometime soon, but not yet. And a website is expected to be able to list the banks or funds that provide this funding. The kind of organisation behind this is still in its early stage development or refinement. There will be loans for medium and large, what are called mid-capital firms, universities, research institutes, and other types of organisations. And for medium and large mid-caps, this facility will offer loans of between 7.5 million to 25 million. It's large, but I don't think that that's necessarily where we need to go into much greater depth than that at the moment, other than saying it's available, we can find more information, but the Access to Risk Finance Work Programme does not yet state precise deadline dates. But all of this information will be updated and put on the website, which is Access to EU Finance, and I can provide that link as well. I mentioned that there is a call that's opening next 1st of March, next Saturday. A link to that is a table there then of when the first evaluation dates are scheduled, so that if it opens 1st of March for phase 1, the first evaluation cut-off point will be June, and that's when all those applications that have been received will be evaluated, and the anticipated 8 to 12 weeks would mean that kind of September, perhaps late September, will be a time when you would get to know whether your project's been successful. For phase 2, the very first cut-off point is going to be October. So between March and October, you can put together, or you have time to put together, an application in the form of this online process using the template provided to reflect your growth plans and developments to try and move that forward. And then there's a rolling schedule, because it's a continuously open call, for evaluation dates going forward. There are some further links there that will take you to further information. Coming up as well is, it's planned, there will be a frequently asked questions section, which is not there yet, but will be available soon, or so I'm informed by the people at the Commission who I emailed the other day. And that will include further questions such as, if I'm a non-profit organisation, can I take part? The answer is not in this SME instrument, but other parts of Horizon 20. So those kinds of questions will be addressed. The draft templates I've mentioned are available, but they will be, as the drafts, revised, and the final versions, I'm assured, will be available from the 1st of March when the call goes live. News of any further updates and developments I've circulated previously on LinkedIn, including there's an event in Brussels on the 3rd of March which will be webcast, and that includes an opportunity for those attending to ask questions, but you could then feed into the information because it's, again, specifically focused on SMEs, and I can provide more details again. So, in conclusion, there are lots of sources of further information. Terminology is important in putting the application together, which is why I've suggested that the model application that my colleagues in my NCP colleagues throughout Europe prepared, I suggest, is worth sitting down with a coffee or a tea or a latte or whatever and spending time thinking about your plans in the context of what that's looking for in terms of questions and the evaluators' hints, guides and tips, relating that then to the application template that you will then be required to complete. I think, unless I've got any questions, Jane, specifically to address? No?
Can you give the website which the webcast is?
I will provide that website, yes. I'll do that as soon as we've finished here. Yes, that's not a problem. I will provide that website for this webcast in Brussels on the 3rd of March. It's a morning event. Be aware that they're an hour ahead of us, so if they said it starts at 9 o'clock, that's 8 o'clock our time. I've made that mistake in the past. But yes, I will make that available. So, in conclusion, any of the information I've referred to in this presentation or any particular questions I get, you can by all means email me or phone me, but I would like to wish everyone luck and success with their applications and their future project development. And then thank you very much.